Hello everyone. For number 15, we have our first factoring question. One of the questions earlier in the exam could have been solved by factoring, or maybe not if you used a different strategy, but first a real one where we have to factor here. And it doesn't say explicitly to factor it, but if you look through the choices, each of them is a factored expression of the original trinomial. So that's basically what we're doing here. So what we're going to start by doing is taking a look or setting up two binomials, or as I like to call them, we're going to double bubble here. Okay, and now this is a trinomial, so right away always start by looking for a GCF. In this case we don't have one. There's no coefficients or numbers that they have in common. They each don't have an x term, so I can't factor that out. The only strategy I can use to factor here is what I like to call the sum product rule, with a little catch. Okay, with the sum product rule, you're looking for two numbers that have a sum of b, which is the coefficient of the x term, and two numbers that have a product of c, which is just a constant on the end. Okay, so this is what we're referring to with b, the negative 12, and this is what we're referring to with c, the constant 36. The one little catch here, usually when we do sum product, we have x squared minus something like x squared minus 12x plus 36. So what's different about this one? We have x to the fourth. Now the only thing that's going to change, instead of usually we just throw an x in as the first term in each one and we don't really think about it, if we just put an x in each one, when we FOIL, if we were to check it, we're going to get x squared. So what can I put in each binomial to give me that x to the fourth when I FOIL it? An x squared. Because if I multiply this out, if I go to check this, x squared times x squared gives me that x to the fourth. And it's also going to, once I throw numbers in here, it's going to give me a middle or a b term that has an x squared component. That's the only little catch here. And now, searching for those two numbers. So our two numbers have to have a sum of negative 12 and a product of 36. There's a few ways to go about searching for these numbers. You can be selective, and I always like to say start with the product component. There's less options available that multiply to something than there are that add to something. And also take a look at the sum. Our two numbers have to add to a negative and somehow multiply to a positive. So they're obviously both negative. It wouldn't make sense to have two positive numbers that add to a negative number. And that will give us a positive product because, as we know, a negative times a negative becomes a positive. And now, now that we've eliminated it down to that, we can just kind of put out some guesses. So I'm going to incorrectly guess here just to kind of show the process. Let's say I guess negative 12 and negative 3. That would have a product of 36, which checks out, but the sum there would be negative 15. So we're off slightly. Then I'm going to guess negative 6, or try out negative 6 and negative 6. Again, they multiply to positive 36, and negative 6 minus 6 is correctly negative 12. So those are my two numbers. I'm going to put those in my binomials, including the sign. Whatever your sign is when you find these two numbers, those have to go in your bubbles. If you got positive 6, you would have to put in a plus sign here. And that would be our correct answer here. Always keep in mind you can factor these further. If it was a written question and it said something like factor completely, you would check if you could do a dots or another GCF or something like that. In this case, we only see that they're factored once in all four choices, and 6 isn't perfect, so we can't do a dots or a difference of two squares anyway. So that leaves us with a final answer of x squared minus 6 times x squared minus 6. So now let's look through the choices, and we see that in choice 1 we have exactly what we got. X squared minus 6, x squared minus 6. What would be an alternative to doing this question? If you don't like factoring, you could simply look at the choices and just FOIL and see which one matches up. So like quickly with 2, you would get 6x squared and 6x squared if you multiplied, which would be positive 12x squared. So you can kind of almost like mentally foil or quickly foil one or two terms to see what matches up. Positive 6 and negative 6 would give you negative 36. Over here, we would have negative x squared times positive x squared is going to be negative x to the fourth. Just by doing like one part of the FOIL concept, you can eliminate the choices down. And that would be kind of, if you weren't sure how to factor this or how to go about doing this. Okay, thank you for watching, and hopefully this helped.